There was one day we were going to have a race. It was the equivalent of probably a 660, and it was individual. And my whole goal was to beat Robert Dicus, to be the fastest runner in my room. I went back to school, so I decided to get my degree, so I went to a junior college. And at that junior college, I started taking women's courses, women in history, women in literature. And the first course that I took was so shocking to me, in that women actually had accomplished things in their lives, writers and artists, and so it was sort of a big epiphany at that moment, and I got very involved in my school and decided that the campus needed a sort of a women's organization. We didn't really have one on campus, and I felt it was necessary, so we set up what we called the Women's Caucus, like a mock-up from an ad from the 50s, and there's a man and a woman in a bar. And the man's looking at the woman, he says, you know, what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? And her response is, I own it. I like it. I own it.
Anything else?
I had called the National Organization for Women because of the sexual harassment I had been going through. And it was January Riddle, who I still see her to this day. And I called her and I was telling her what was happening. She goes, well, honey, you know, it sounds like a terrible experience. We don't really have anyone that does that, but you seem very knowledgeable. Why don't you come head up the employment discrimination areas? And so I did. I would go down there. We did voter registration. We had an old ironing board that we take out, and that was our table for registering voters. And I did a lot of employment discrimination work. Right around '89, a lot of surfers would come in during the day and tell me they were getting sick. And I thought, they just don't want to go to work because they want to go surfing, you know. But I kept hearing it over and over again. So I started doing some research, and what I found was that most of the storm drains discharged directly into the ocean untreated because they didn't go to the sewer system. But they weren't ever mapped. So I set about mapping them and looking at what was happening and the raw sewage and the issues, and started getting involved at City Council, started writing columns, started really getting involved. And a lot of times we would have press events and people would say, well, who are you with? And I would say, well, I'm with myself. So we made up an organization called Surfers Tired of Pollution or Stop, and that became very powerful and very, very successful. We forced the city to go upstream and try and make a determination what was causing the pollution, and it was raw sewage. One of my favorite sayings maybe explains it, and it's a saying by Gandhi, and it says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And you can have a good sense of humor and have singing toilets and do some outrageous things, and what are they going to do to you? I mean, if it doesn't kill you, what can they do?